And this morning, our presentation is a webinar on encouraging inclusive entrepreneurship hosted by the NCI SBIR Development Center. My name is Christy Canary. I'm also joined by my colleague, Corey Hallett. We are both program directors here, and we will be talking about the AAP program, eligibility, and tips for you to put together strong applications. One of our last housekeeping notes is that we will be collecting questions. So we would love this to be an interactive process. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. At the end of our presentation, we will be addressing your questions. If you can also, at the end, please complete our post-event survey. This is a quick bit.ly link, bit.ly/NCI SBIR feedback. We would love to hear from you. Our ability to put together these presentations is a direct result of the feedback we get from you, our audience members. And of course, for additional questions, feel free to contact us at our email inbox, ncisbir@mail.nih.gov. Again, here we are. I'm joined by Corey Hallett. I am Christy Canario. We will be talking about the AAP program. So who are you? We are guessing, I'm assuming that many of you will be researchers or entrepreneurs or innovators with technologies, and you are looking to translate those to the market. Maybe you are maybe still in academia and thinking about moving your technology out. Maybe you are still starting your new company, and you want to, continue developing that technology. Maybe you are already a small business and you haven't been able to take advantage of the AAP program, take advantage of the SBIR program. We're here to talk about how that can be facilitated with some of our programs here. At this time, if you want to take a quick break and ask if anyone can hear us online, if you would please put the chat on. Can you confirm that any of you can hear us? Okay, great. So I see that some of you can hear us, and so if you cannot hear us, please take a look at the WebEx options on getting audio access. You can either have the computer system call you back, or you can dial in directly. Thank you, everyone. All right. So again, you are all very engaged. We love to hear that. We love to see that. And you are researchers either at the academic side thinking about spinning out, or you are part of a new small business and you want to continue developing that technology you've got. If you haven't already engaged with SBIR, we strongly encourage you to. And when we look at the census report from 2012, we see that there is great engagement and great opportunity for folks to take advantage of small business innovation opportunities using these programs. When we look at the gender and minority breakdown for participation to date, we've seen that there is participation, but of course this is something that we increasingly want to make available for all people who are interested in engaging in entrepreneurship and innovation. And so the SBIR program, and what we're trying to do is to increase engagement with researchers who are interested in participating in these programs. And so that's part of our presentation today, is to make available for you the information on how to take advantage of these programs and give additional guidance where it's needed, because we believe that anyone who has a strong idea should have the opportunity to engage with us, specifically through the SBIR program. So the SBIR applicant pool, part of our ability to understand who's applying, a lot of it is predicated on folks being able to self-certify themselves. And so when we look at the current application pool, we have a breakdown of women-owned small business, socially disadvantaged small businesses, and combinations of those businesses. We would love to see those numbers increase. We would also love to see education for those audiences increase. For many of you who've applied to NIH before, you may recognize that there's an opportunity to put in your original submission, and then depending on how your application is received, there's also an opportunity to resubmit. One of the takeaways we hope you have in today's webinar is if you apply and then don't get the award, please consider resubmitting. there is a great opportunity for increasing success rates if folks can resubmit. So just breaking this down, if you don't already believe me, then I encourage you to believe people who have gone through the program. The program is very competitive. When we look at the success rates from previous years, we know that being able to resubmit greatly influences your ability to get the award. So what do we do at the NCI SBIR Development Center? We have a number of core activities. Our major one, of course, is providing funding to the small business community through our SBIR and STTR set-asides. We also provide oversight for more than 400 individual SBIR STTR awards at the National Cancer Institute. We also conduct outreach throughout the nation, throughout the country. We attend conferences and workshops. We visit on-site at various states and organizations and universities to raise awareness of the program. I'm not sure how each of you found us today, but we hope that moving forward you will stay engaged and look for us when we are out around and doing outreach. Another major function of our office is to provide guidance and mentorship to our awardees and our pre-applicants. So this AAP program is going to be a more formal opportunity for folks to engage with us. But even if you don't come in through the AAP program, please know that guidance and mentorship is a huge part of what our program officers do in this office. Lastly, networking and partnerships. Once you get into the program, we're able to provide additional support because we understand that moving a technology from the lab to the bench and into the market requires more than just funding. And so we do have an active role in supporting our awardees through networking and partnership opportunities. So we think about the entrepreneurial ecosystem sort of broken out in this slide. A lot of what we do is focus on the policies made available, specifically through those SBIR, STTR set-aside programs, through financing, not just through phase 1 and phase 2, which we'll talk about shortly, but also through follow-on funding, like our NCI phase 2B bridge program. Culturally, we try to understand how the entrepreneur and innovators work. We know that highlighting success stories among you and your peers helps provide motivation for you to continue working on the hard problems you're studying. We have markets that we address through programs like the I-Core at NIH program, which I help manage for the NIH and the CDC, looking at customer discovery so you as the entrepreneurs can understand where your technologies fill an unmet need. Human capital, we continue to conduct outreach at institutions and other supporting organizations like incubators and with support through commercialization assistance programs. If you aren't already familiar with the SBIR, STTR programs, these are congressionally mandated. This slide is just to demonstrate how much funding we are able to provide for the community. If you see down there at the bottom right, the NIH, these are FY18 numbers, fiscal year 2018, set aside more than $1 billion to support entrepreneurship, innovation, commercialization through the SBIR and STTR programs. And at the NCI, that came out to be $167 million. So we are putting significant effort into supporting entrepreneurs and innovators in the ecosystem. We do it with funding, and we also do it with programming. So if you aren't already familiar with the NIH, we are actually 27 different institutes and centers across the National Institutes of Health. Up here in the top row, you'll see sort of bolded in red is the National Cancer Institute. So we are just one of 27 institutes at the NIH, and one of 23 that actually have an SBIR STTR program. And that's important because of how we're structuring this pilot AAP program. And this is only going to be available in this pilot for NCI relevant technologies. When you think about the program, once you get in, the program is phased. There's phase 1, which is proof of concept, scope work. There's phase 2, which is more R&D. There's opportunities to apply in a combination fashion through the fast track mechanism, where you apply for both your phase 1 and your phase 2 proposed work in a single application. For those of you who've already done phase 1 equivalent work, we also have a direct to phase 2 mechanism, which allows you to come in straight through the phase 2 program. I also have at the bottom left a number of budget caps, and these are the sorts of things that we can talk about and help demystify for you, both when you come in through the AAP program or when you come in directly to our office. We can talk about how to scope out the work, which budget caps are appropriate for applicants to take advantage of. We have just, as of this week, re-released the newest omnibus solicitations. And so this bottom right link here to waiver topics sort of highlights the areas where the National Cancer Institute and its sister institutes are providing higher budget caps. On this slide, we sort of map that pathway from SBIR and STTR phase 1, phase 2, phase 2B, all the way to phase 3. And phase 3 is really where we call, at the NIH, sort of the commercial stage. We don't actually put federal funds into this, but it's great to sort of overlay it across the other resources we have. So once you get an award, there are a lot of opportunities to continue engaging with NCI SBIR's programming, and those are given here underneath and mapped against SBIR phase 1, phase 2, and bridge. But before that, before you get in, we have the Applicant Assistance Program, which we're piloting right now. And so, keeping in mind that this program, AAP, is to help you get into the program, it's important that you also understand what the eligibility is to get in. So in this slide, we sort of break it down. The eligible applicant must be a small business concern. So for those of you in the audience who aren't yet an SBC, that is okay. The AAP program will help you get all your registrations done, or at least identify for you which ones need to be completed, so that you will be meeting this eligibility criterion. That SBC must then be organized as a for-profit entity in the U.S. And for us in SBIR, small actually means 500 or fewer employees. The last criterion here is that the company must be at least 50% owned by individuals or independently operated. And there's an added eligibility criterion for SBIR applicants. This does not apply for STTR, but for SBIR, we also recognize that some companies require, significant amounts of funding. And so if you've received a lot of influx from, let's say, venture capital-owned companies, VCOCs, if you're more than 50% owned by VCOC or hedge fund, et cetera, you can still be eligible for the STTR program, so long as no single VCOC owns more than 50% of the company. I know this is a lot of jargon to throw at you, but again, the AAP program is one that will help break down what these eligibility criteria mean. And so for many of you, perhaps you're still at the bench. You may have heard of the SBIR program, you may have heard of the STTR program, but you may not really appreciate what that means, what the differences are. So really quickly, I'll break them down. For the SBIR program, this permits, it allows collaboration between the small business and the research institute partner, like a university. For STTR, that sort of collaboration is a requirement of the proposal. The other eligibility criterion is where the PI of the grant proposal is majority employed. And I want to stress this is where the majority employment happens at the time of award, not even at the time of application. So let's say you're a researcher at an institution and you're thinking about doing either SBIR or STTR. When you submit your application, let's say the next date, September 5th, it doesn't matter if today you're still at the research institution. What will matter is where you'll be majority employed for the portion of the phase 1 work, for example. So for SBIR, the PI on the grant must be at least 50% with the small business for the duration of the project. For STTR, it's okay if that PI is majority employed at the small business or at the research institution. The other major critical difference is how the budgets are split up. And for many folks, these budget constraints help drive the decision if you're going to apply for an SBIR or an STTR. For SBIR, and specifically in phase one, at least 2/3 of the work has to be done by the small business, leaving up to 1/3 of the work effort by other subcontractors or third parties. Under the STTR program, at least 40% of the work should be done by the small business, with a minimum of 30% being done by the research institution. So that leaves anywhere from 30 to 60%, as an example, of the budget going to a research institution. So when you think about how to put together your application, those are the main criteria folks usually look at. Where the PI will be majority employed at the time of the award, and what the budget constraints are. We'll also talk about, through the AEP program, what the score review criteria are for the program. If you've applied for an R1 or an R21 or a K award, you may already be familiar with these criteria. They still apply for SBIR, STTR applications. We look for the significance of the technology. What is the unmet need you are addressing? We look for the approach. This is basically the science, the need of this. Many of you will have a strong idea about what the science is that you want to propose. The innovation, what is the technology that you are developing, and how does this compare to what's already in the market or in development? The investigator, who is the team that you've put together, and do you have all the right folks on your team? And then what is the environment? Do you have the facilities available to carry out the work that you're proposing? These are all things that the review panels at NIH's Center for Scientific Review will be considering. But because these are SBIR and STTR applications, there's also criterion around commercialization. There should be an understanding by the applicant business what the final product would be and how they plan to get there. And if you get into the AAP program, some of the things we can talk about are how you present that potential idea and how you plan to get there through the SBIR, STTR program. On this slide, we've updated it with the latest funding opportunity announcements and receipt dates. I won't go through all of them, but suffice to say the top one is for the omnibus solicitation. And for folks who are applying to the AAP program, it is with the understanding that the applicants will be submitting an application for the next date, which is September 5th, 2019. So we'll leave that with you to think about. And with that, I will pass over the slide deck to my colleague, Corey.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to make a quick housekeeping note that we're going to take questions at the end, but there were 2 budget clarification questions that I thought might be better answered right now. So one is that the set-aside, there's a question about the set-aside. Is the STTR program, the 0.45%, is that nested within the 3% for the SBIR program? And the answer to that is no. The SBIR program, the set-aside is 3% of the whole extramural budget at NCI, and the 0.45% is also of the whole extramural budget. So I just want to make that clarification. And I'm going to let Christy share the next one because it's good news. So someone said that the NCI used to cap waiver topics at 300,000. Did that increase?
Oh my goodness, yes it did. And I think that alert came out just this week, so it's very timely.
Yeah.
So folks, this is probably the first webinar where you'll get to hear it. But for NCI, our budget waiver topic cap is now at $400K for phase 1. It's still $2 million for phase 2, but it's now $400K for phase 1. And that link that I shared previously, which you'll all get when you review these PDF slides, which will be made available. I see those questions for that. And this webinar recording will also be made available, at least with the slides. You'll be able to click those hyperlinks for that. I'm just wanting to scroll back up to some of the questions that I saw, scrolling back really quickly. One of them was a question about STTR. Could the PI on an STTR be at the small business? Absolutely, yes. STTR gives you the flexibility to have the PI either at the small business or at the research institution. So there's that added flexibility with STTR.
One note on that, if you are the PI at the institution, you want to make sure that your budget is coming from the institution portion of the award and it's not coming from the small business portion of the award. That can hang people up sometimes with an STTR. So that's something that through the AAP, those are the sorts of specifics that the AAP is designed to help you understand. If for some reason you're not part of the AAP, you can always contact program officers and ask them as you're preparing your SBIR application.
Yeah, and I wanted to grab one more question that I saw before I let Corey take the lead. There was a question about international collaboration permitted. For the purposes of SBIR and STTR, these are federally funded programs, and part of the policy around it is that the dollars that go to the award also go to subcontractors who are operating in the U.S. There are some special caveats about that, and so that's another opportunity for you to engage with us either through the AAP program or with the program director directly. But in general, those dollars have to go to entities in the U.S. There are scientific justifications that may be allowed, but not economic justifications to go around that.
Okay, we recognize there's some other good questions, and we'll get to them at the end. We wanted to make those clarification questions from Sarah about budget and eligibility. So if you've submitted a question and we haven't responded yet, we still plan to. So getting ready for SBIR and STTR, I wanted to highlight quickly that our applicants come from diverse backgrounds. All our applicants not only come from academia, but I just give these two examples. One is Modulation Therapeutics, is a company that we have supported. And Lori Hazelhurst, one of the co-founders of this company, she is an academic. She was moving a technology forward with R01 funding, and once it became clear that it was a commercialization candidate, they spun out a company and started pursuing SBIR funding to move that forward. So that's a very typical applicant to either the SBIR or the STTR program, depending on some of the specifics. Another example is Aruna Gambhir. Aruna Gambhir is the CEO of a company called Cellsite. She has a very traditional industry background. She identified a technology to spin out of a university, licensed it, and is now seeking SBIR and STTR funding to move that technology forward as she tries to de-risk that technology to seek private investment. So these are two examples, one from an academic background and one from an industry background. And when we were developing the AAP, we really thought about both of these types of applicants. And so as Christy mentioned before, we have a number of initiatives for awardees, but we recognize that there are specific hurdles that people have to face to get into the SBIR program or STTR program. And so when taking a look at our initiatives and where they fall in the pipeline, we recognize that there was this big hole sort of leading, helping people get into the pipeline. And so that's the whole purpose of the Applicant Assistance Program, is to provide help. What this program is free application assistance. It will assist the small business prepare their application. This is not a grant writer. They will not prepare the application for you. They will provide feedback. They'll help you, as Christy mentioned previously, if you are starting a small business now and planning to seek SBIR funding, they'll help you with the required registrations. They won't help you with forming your business. They won't help you decide if you're an LLC or incorporated. They're not going to help with that, but they'll help you prepare all of your registrations in preparation for submitting to the SBIR and STTR program. In 2019, this is for cancer technologies only, and the goal here really is to provide applicants with a coach and some mentorship on the NIH application process for SBIR and STTR. So we're really interested in people who have a limited network as it relates to SBIR or NIH funding. So if we think about SBIR and STTR as opposed to academic grants, and this is a busy slide, but I'll try to walk you through it. If we think about the criteria, the scored criteria that Christy talked about, with the things that go into the application and the things that you get out of it, we think of an academic grant as really hinging on the science, the approach and the team and the environment, all these things that go into the work. Those should be appropriate for really moving science forward. And the things that come out, the innovation and the significance and the knowledge that we've gained should be maximized based on those things that we go in. But we really want to move the field forward in a scientific understanding. Now, one thing that we recognize can be a little bit of a challenge even for people who are well-versed in NIH grants, but they've written a lot of academic grants, is to now change their application to focus on the product. And this is really critical for SBIR and STTR. It's a nuance, but NCI alone receives about 1,400 applications a year into the SBIR STTR program, so sometimes those nuances are really important and make the difference between funding and not funding. So if we think about centering on the product, all the parts of the application should focus on why the things that are going into the product, why it's appropriate to move the product forward, and what you're going to get out of it. So what paradigm you're going to change, what behavior you're going to change when that product hits the market. And this is a really important way. So that the AAP, one of the goals of the AAP is to help people frame this in a way. You only have 6 pages for a research plan in a phase 1 application, so it's a challenge, and there's definitely an art to that. So the goal of the AAP is to help you with that. The eligibility is simple. The eligibility is just that the company has not been previously funded through the NIH SBIR and STTR program. I want to make a note that there is some room potentially for applicants that have not received funding prior to 2009. Those would be reviewed maybe on a case-by-case basis to see that because the program changes from time to time, it's possible that they'll be as unfamiliar with the program as someone who's never received money. While not eligibility criteria, I do want to note that we are particularly interested in women-owned and women-run businesses, minority-owned and minority-owned businesses, and also small businesses that are operating in idea states. Idea states, for those that are not familiar, this is an NIH designation. These are states that have limited NIH funding. And since the purpose of the AAP is to try to help provide a network for people who have a limited network when it comes to NIH funding, we're particularly interested in idea states because we believe that they may need a little extra support with understanding the NIH funding process. The application is simple. I think what's important is we don't want to make this a complicated application to then help you with your complicated SBIR and STTR application. So we tried to design this so that the application was very simple. There's a series of structured questions. There are, I think, 2 supporting documents, one of which is an abstract for the technology. We also ask for a description of the current state of the technology, as well as what types of preliminary data are in hand, and then submit. So this should take a limited amount of time. You shouldn't have to spend 10 weeks getting ready for this, for the application into the AAP. We have one cohort of the AAP in 2019. The application portal opened on April 18th, so it's open now. We have the webinar today, and on May 21st, we'll have an online Q&A with Christy and myself to answer questions, maybe give some a little overview again if there's people that weren't able to attend this webinar, and maybe answer some frequently asked questions on that. And then on May 30th, the AAP applications are due, and we want to note that the applications are due by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this system will not roll to your current time like the NIH application portal does or grants.gov does. This is 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so people on the West Coast, please make note of that.
Or if you're in Hawaii.
Or if you're in Hawaii, yeah. If that is an important idea state. So the program would run between June and September and help the participants prepare their application for the September 5th deadline. So whether you are a participant in the Applicant Assistance Program or just an applicant to the NCI SBIR program, we want to let you know that you can always contact us. We will review your specific aims. This information is also on our website. And so you can go to sbir.cancer.gov and access this. We have our areas of expertise And on our website, we also have our email addresses there, and so please feel free. And if you are part of the AAP, part of the process will be to send your specific aims to the program director that's aligned with your project as you're going through the process. But if you don't end up submitting to the AAP, please know that that option is still available to you. You can send your specific aims to a program director and ask for feedback. We request that you do that at least a month before the deadline. And with that, I think that's most of our information. We want to thank you for logging on. We have a number of questions that we'll get to. We hope this was informative, and we want to remind everyone to please take the post-event survey.
Yes, please do. That helps us to help you, and we're all about helping each other. So on there, you'll see the NCI SBIR at mail.nih.gov. Again, that's where you can send your draft specific aims. Don't worry about who the right program officer is. We will make sure it gets to the first available one. At NCI SBIR is our Twitter handle, so you can follow us on social media. We love to highlight you and your stories on that platform. And again, that link that Corey talked about for our feedback, bit.ly.com/NCI SBIR feedback. I do have a couple questions that I saw here. One of them is, how do I get a copy of this presentation? And I want you to know that per some federal policies, we will be making this what we call 508 compliant, so that all members of the community can view them. So it'll be about 2 to 3 weeks before we can get that out to you to view, but it will be made available. Another question that I caught here was, what technologies will be covered? I have a digital health technology. Will you support that through the AAP? And the short answer is yes.
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 We have, so anything that is aligned with the NCI mission, which is that it be relevant to cancer, will be accepted or eligible for the AAP. And we have a growing e-health and digital health portion of our portfolio. So absolutely, it is welcome.
Another question I caught on the thread was, does the applicant for AAP need to be affiliated with a university to be eligible? And the answer is no.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, as I showed the 2 examples of our typical applicants, we definitely have people who are not affiliated with the university. I understand my example that was licensed out of the university, but we definitely have people who are not affiliated with the university apply to our program, and you are still eligible as long as you meet the small business entity meets the eligibility criteria that Christy laid out in one of the earlier slides.
And as an example, if you currently work at university, you may have the luxury and advantage of having full staff who help submit your grant to the NIH.
It depends on the university.
You may have that. But many small businesses who then strike out on their own no longer have that resource. And so, that's why we think the AAP provides value for folks. If you don't know how to put your application in and get all the right things in place, we want to provide you with that support. Another question that I caught was, how do we reach out, or who do you reach out to if your original, let's call it your 01 application submission was not funded? My short answer is, take a look at the summary statement that comes out after a review takes place. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll find the name of a program official along with their contact information, their email, and I think even our phone numbers.
Yes, our direct lines are on there. They sure are.
So you can take a look at that. If you've been scored, you've already been assigned a point of contact. That person is your program official. Maybe it's Corey, maybe it's me, maybe it's one of our colleagues.
Yes, absolutely. There were a number of questions about how, sort of what we would call the post-submission process, and so what to do if you're depending on your score. And we always encourage people to reach out to their program officer. It doesn't necessarily help right when you get a score, so 2 things will happen. Right after peer review, within a couple days of peer review, you'll be, a score will be released to you, and it will either be a numerical score or it will be an unscored. If you have questions about the fundable range, if you receive a numerical score and you have questions about the fundable range, contact your program officer at that time. They'll have additional information. But for almost everybody, it is best to wait until the summary statement is released, which are comments from the reviewers. And at that time, it's always a good idea to touch base with your program officer, and as Christy mentioned at the top of the summary statement, we'll have your program officer's contact information, so don't hesitate to reach out to us. One question that I think we received in the chat and we have received regularly is, if I apply for the April 5th receipt date, am I still eligible for the AAP? The short answer to this is that, well, it's not short, it depends. So the trick here is that if you are applying to the AAP with the exact same proposal that you submitted to April 5th, it doesn't eliminate your eligibility from the AAP, but it would be difficult for us to know based on the timing if that application you submitted April 5th would be funded. If you are applying to AAP with something that is a different application to the one that you applied with to the SBIR program on April 5th, then absolutely there should not be an issue there. I want to go back. Early in the presentation, there was a question about low approval success, I think by women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. And is that a question, is that because of the science or is that a budget issue? And I just want to note, we do not, there's no set aside specifically for women-owned businesses or socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. So any of the success rates that you see, this is simply what we got in the door and what came out of peer review that was fundable. So there is a question, just to clarify, the PI submitting the STTR proposal can be 100% employed at the research institution as long as it devotes minimum of 10% effort and sorry, I should wear my glasses, the participating company will perform a minimum of 40% of the planned project, correct? Yes, that is correct. There is no employment stipulation for the PI under the STTR program. They do have to dedicate 10% effort. That does not mean 10% salary, but they do have to dedicate 10% effort.
We're just scrolling through.
We're looking through. We have a lot of questions we're looking through.
Would you recommend going straight for fast track or phase 1 first? That's a great question that we see a lot while we're on the road.
Yeah, I would encourage you to look at our website and see which program officer is in your technology space and contact them. Just a note, the AAP is only for phase 1 applications, so if you're submitting a fast track, you wouldn't be eligible for the AAP. But if you're deciding between those two things, we always encourage you to do what's best for you and for your technology. And so contact your program officer sooner rather than later. Talk to them about where your technology is and what they recommend.
That's great.
How many people from the company can participate during the AAP if selected? We don't have a rule on this. You'll receive a certain number of hours of coaching. I suppose if you wanted to do that in a group setting, I'm not sure why that would be an issue. I think that would come down to the group that is in the trenches, providing the feedback and if it is working or not, I think, with the size of your group. But there's no specific stated number.
Here's another question I see. We are interested in submitting SBIR application for a non-cancer field, like, let's say, liver fibrosis. Which branch of the NIH should we approach? So this is an interesting opportunity to point out that when you apply to NIH SBIR, you apply to the NIH. And the Center for Scientific Review will look at your application and then give it an assignment. And there are different algorithms that take place to help make that assignment. So if you didn't want to make any recommendation yourself on where it should go, you could let CSR make the call, and even if you do decide to provide your input on where you think it should go, Center for Scientific Review will still make the final call on where it should go.
Your application may be best at National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive Disorders. You can also, if you're having a difficult time deciding which institute is best, the NIH SBIR process can help with that. Their website is sbir.nih.gov, and they have sort of a higher level view than we do at NCI.
And along with the omnibus materials that were just published this week, there is another document that refers to research topics of interest at NIH. And if you go to that, document, that PDF, it's a searchable document, and you can look to see what each of the institute centers at NIH has listed as their areas of research interest. And so you can do a search function that way and see what aligns best historically for funding.
We have a couple questions about patenting. I think there was a question about whether, I'm not 100% sure whether the NIH application, maybe it constitutes a public disclosure. The AAP will have hopefully nothing exceptionally sensitive. It should be an abstract and maybe a brief description of the current status of the technology. NIH submissions, my understanding is that those do not constitute public disclosures. You should always contact your patent attorney if you have concerns, because we do not provide legal advice. But our understanding is that they should not constitute a public disclosure. We also had a question about does the technology need to be patented, and can patenting fees be included in the budget? So the technology need not be patented to be eligible for the SBIR program, and that's when you apply for SBIR funding in relationship to when you file a patent is a fantastic conversation to have with your patent attorney, and we always recommend that. In addition, the patenting fees cannot be included in the SBIR STTR.
Not as part as your R&D cost in the budget. So through SBIR, STTR, and NIH, we do allow for you to include as an other direct cost line item something titled technical assistance. And for a phase 1 application, you can put up to $6,500 into that line item. You would need to then justify what that money would go towards, and that's where you could support things like a regulatory consultant or some of these fees that you're referencing here. For a phase 2 application, that line item can be as large as $50,000.
And when you do that, you elect to not be part of some of the assistance programs that NIH offers, specifically NICHE and CAP. And so to request that technical assistance up front means you would be ineligible for those programs. Again, I just want to reiterate to everyone on the phone, these are the sorts of details that the AAP will help you sort out. We are happy to continue to answer these questions. I want people to continue to use the chat, but I just want to take the time to point out that there are a lot of details to think about when putting together these applications, and the AAP should help you sort through them.
Yes. And I want to recognize that, yes, we've packed in a lot of information here, probably more than you can write down as we speak. So these slides will be made available in a few weeks and available for you to view.
We have a question about how you find program officers. For example, it sounds like there's an MRI technology. If you go to our website, sbir.cancer.gov, we are all listed there with our areas of expertise. So you'll see under Deepa Narayanan and Asim Subedi, you'll see that this is their area of expertise, and you should reach out. That person specifically should reach out to one of them.
Going to put that up there.
Yeah.
And as further clarification, for some of you really want to use materials, the slides we anticipate will be available next week. A video recording will take a few more weeks after that.
So there's a question about the portal, and it looks like the ownership and leadership drop-down menu in the application portal might be somewhat confusing. So we'll go back and review that and make sure that the portal is in line with what we're asking there. So another question, should you consult your program director before submitting your proposal? You don't have to, but you always can, and we're here to give feedback, especially feedback on whether you should do fast track for phase 1 or potentially direct phase 2. We'll give feedback on your specific aims page, so it can be a helpful resource for some. Is there a limit to the number of hours of help and a limit to the companies accepted? So yes, we're expecting to select about 30 applicants into the AAP this round. That's an estimate. And there will be a cap on the number of hours that you receive for help as part of that. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I'm not going to quote it right now, but there will be a cap. A question, can you seek funding for patented technologies? I'm not 100% sure what your question is there, because it could be that you hold the patent or you're seeking SBIR funding for it to further a technology that somebody else holds the patent on. So the answer probably lies in the details, and you can either send a follow-up chat and we will try to get to it, or you can send an email to a program director and talk to them about your specific situation. In some cases, it's not an eligibility issue, but it is a peer review issue, and so the program director can talk to you about that also.
Okay.
Are there any data from previous years regarding the success rate for SBIR and STTR grants for the specific phases?
Yes, that data is available, and if you go to sbir.nih.gov and/or grants.nih.gov, you can download those Excel files. Those are publicly available for years back into the mid-2000s. And different versions break them out across SBIR, STTR, and the different phases, and even the different ICs, and even the different states from which those applications come. So that data is widely available, publicly available, thank you, for you to view.
Sorry, we're still scrolling. This engaged audience is fantastic. How do we plan to integrate the AAP with the SBDC centers? We think they're fairly complementary. The AAP is specific for NCI, which may be helpful.
That's a good question.
So we have another question, what is meant by the waiver cap as opposed to the hard cap? So there are 3 budget caps to be aware of when you're applying for NIH, SBIR, and STTR funding. The hard cap for a phase 1 is $150,000, or excuse me, the normal cap is $150,000. The hard cap, this is a cap that is set by Congress specific for HHS, and that is $252,000. It was just raised from $225,000 this year up to $252,000. That is for all technologies, all institutes across NIH. You can apply for a maximum of $252,000. The NIH has a special waiver authority in this agreement with the Small Business Administration to exceed that hard cap in specific areas. And so the waiver cap is really specific for each institute. And at NCI, our cap is $400,000 for technologies that fall within sort of these specified waiver areas. And right there on the slide is the link to the waiver topics for NCI. Our topics tend to be fairly broad, but if you follow that link and you're developing a technology within one of those areas, then you can apply for $400,000. You do not need special justification and you do not need pre-approval. You can just apply for the $400,000, and if your application is funded, then it falls on your program officer to make the justification for why $400,000 is necessary.
If we have multiple cancer projects and want to submit SBIR applications for each, is it better to submit them in separate rounds or the same round of applications?
In general, when we see this, because we do see people frequently with a technology that they feel can apply to different cancer indications, we suggest that you apply to them in different rounds. And there are a number of reasons for that, but in general, in peer review, there can sometimes be questions about bandwidth that's raised at a small company, and there can also sometimes weaknesses can carry over from one application to another. And so we generally recommend that you stagger them. The AAP right now is only for, so there's a question, is the AAP only for the September 5th deadline? Currently, that is the only round of the AAP that we are offering. We don't know the future of it, but we hope that it will be reissued. We hope, first and foremost, we hope it's useful and helpful to the applicants. And then assuming that it meets that standard, then we hope it'll be reissued. Do applicants need to be U.S. citizens? I guess this depends. The small business concern that is applying to the SBIR program has to meet the eligibility criteria, so must be owned by U.S. citizens. I believe permanent residents also count, so I think it's citizens or permanent residents. So if you are applying to the Applicant Assistance Program, then the small business concern that you either have or are planning to register during the program must meet those criteria.
And that's something that we can talk with you about as you come into the program. We can help you understand how to meet the eligibility criterion to receive SBIR and STTR.
We have another question about they submitted to a phase 1 to NIH, not NCI. Last round, would they still be eligible for the AAP if it is still pending on 5/30? Yes. So as I mentioned before, as long as it's a different application than the one that is currently under review, if you apply to another institute, then and now you're taking that technology and applying it to cancer, then that would be sufficiently different from the one that's currently under review. Are there examples of successful proposals available? So I'm going to assume that this question is asking about SBIR and STTR proposals. There are example proposals. You can either go to sbir.nih.gov and find some example proposals there, or you can go to NIAID. Usually when I'm trying to identify the link to send to someone asking for example proposals, I just Google NIAID sample application, and they have a whole page that has redacted sample applications, so you can look at what the SBIR and STTR will look like eventually.
And if you're familiar with who or what NIAID is, that's a sister institute from us.
And I see a question just came in. NIAID has examples. Are there NCI proposal examples? We do not. I am only aware of NIAID having examples across NIH, and when you go to the NIH SBIR website, that's what you'll find. They'll link you to NIAID. The proposal will look the same. Those are omnibus solicitation proposals, so the content would be different, and actually those may be a little bit out of date. We're now on Form E, and those may, I don't know if they're Form D or earlier, so the forms may look a little different. I know there's an effort at NIH to try to get some more sample applications out, but it's tricky.
Yeah. Who will decide if I can participate in the AAP?
So the review will happen at NCI.
Not through CSR?
Not through the Center for Scientific Review, no. It'll happen internally at NCI, but there will be, it'll be a group review. It will not be, it won't be just one of us. If you have a project which is suitable for SV or ST, how to decide which program you should choose, I think is the question. Well, I would talk to your program officer. So there are a number of things you can consider. Some people try to look at the success rate between SBIR and STTR historically. The STTR program, is a much smaller set-aside, and so the success rate in that program tends to be a lot more variable. But I would call your program officer and talk to them about the specifics of your situation, and they'll oftentimes be able to advise you. Are there AAP-like programs at other institutes, especially NIA? Not currently. This is only for the NCI this round, and so we don't know about future versions of the program.
I also want to add that if you aren't familiar with the NIH's SBIR programs, a lot of our efforts tend to be exercises in pilot programming. And so it's extremely important for us that when we do a program like this, when we do a pilot like this, that we have strong engagement and communication with the participants in these programs. And so that's just to stress, if you get into the program, your feedback is incredibly informative for us in how we continue providing programming for you. And also your ability to provide us feedback through that bit.ly link that we shared previously is extremely helpful in our ability to continue creating quality programming.
So one more question, does the NCI have a safe rate for indirects? The SBIR program allows the company to take an indirect rate of 40%, that's in the legislation, or at least in the policy, so that's NIH-wide. And if you're subcontracting to a university, the university is allowed to take their negotiated indirect rate on their subaward. One thing to note, though, for those on here that are academics, is that SBIR budget caps are on total cost, not direct cost. So if you are subcontracting to a university with a large indirect rate, just think about that when you're developing your budget. You can always call your program officer and talk to them about your budget if you have questions. Also, if you're part of the AAP, these things, there will be a nice point of contact to talk about budget.
And with that, we will wrap up today's webinar presentation. We thank each of you for your engagement today. We hope that this webinar was useful and helpful for you. As we mentioned, the slides should be available next week, with the video recording available a few weeks after that. If you want to engage with us again, you can always reach out to us, NCI SBIR at mails@nih.gov. We will also have our next open air Q&A session on May 21st. So that's another opportunity for you to ask more questions, anything that you didn't get here.
Correct. And if we didn't get to your questions today, I think we got to nearly all of them, but if we didn't get to your questions today, feel free to email us a follow-up, and we will get back to you.
All right. With that, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.